I didn't start writing music to get published. I wrote music because I was teaching and because I love teaching kids, and I like writing music too. So it's like, you know what? If one doesn't work out, hey, it's like hit the reset button. I got into this because I like doing this, which also kind of refreshes your writing, because now you're not trying to write for a publishing objective. You're writing for a musical objective, which might make your music more desired by a publisher. You know what I mean? So it could be a self-fulfilling thing too.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 28. My guest for this episode is composer Chris Bernotas. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening and for your support. If you find value from the show and haven't already done so, please leave me a rating on iTunes. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're really loving what you hear, you can even support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Mark J. Connor. Now, on to the episode. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. You were one of the first people that I thought of when I started the podcast as a guest. But a mutual acquaintance of ours stole you from me before I could ask you. But that's okay.
I'm glad to do two of them. I'll do more if you want.
I don't have any more, but I'll ask around for you.
Okay.
All right. So, Chris, if you could introduce yourself for the audience.
Sure. I am a high school band director in New Jersey. I've been teaching at Mountain Lakes High School for 23 years, totally teaching for 26 years. And I've been very lucky in having developed many relationships through teaching, but also through composition of music and publishing of music, or lucky to have some music published and connecting with teachers and directors that way. But my first and foremost job is teaching high school kids.
Yeah. And so you've been, as you mentioned, a high school teacher for 23 years, so you've got plenty to offer there. But, just to kind of fill more of that story in, you are a composer published with many pieces.
Yes.
And you're also one of the co-authors of the Sound Innovation books.
Yes. Sound Innovations ensemble development has been a big part of my life for the past several years. And I love that so much because it's a direct growth from teaching.
Yep.
My passion in what I do is taking kids from point A to point B, seeing where they start and seeing where they finish. And that particular series tapped into exactly my teaching philosophy and really, honestly, how I teach ensembles. And fortunately for me, Dr. Boonshaft, who was my co-author on that, has a very similar philosophy in how to make an ensemble play as a band and getting kids to go from being an individual to playing in part of a large group. So if that first meeting didn't go well, the project would have been a disaster.
Sure. So at this point, I usually ask about someone's background, but I kind of want to follow up on this. So how would you describe that with the Sound Innovations series? How would you describe that philosophy that makes it different from the others, perhaps, or makes it unique to you?
What's unique about it is we sat down and thought very carefully about what are the differences between practicing and performing as an individual, and what is it like to sit in a group of students of varying abilities, varying levels of talent, and different scenarios. What are the differences between playing as one and playing as many? And then what we did was we isolated those skills that are needed and made a bunch of exercises to address those individual skills. So if it's a tone, matching pitch, a bunch of exercises that match pitch, and having variety, so you're not just doing one exercise over and over and over again so that kids tune out and lose the focus of the exercise. So similar exercises to address those types of skills: balance, intonation, articulation. And then we have a variety of composers that submitted chorales to join in all of those. They're basically chapter summaries. We take the ensemble skills separately, and then you apply them in little beautiful pieces of music. So what's unique about it is you get the skill reinforced, and then you get the application of the skill. And I think that isolation is really what makes kids get it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've done in my teaching that I feel is really important is I always share the goals. I don't keep my lesson plans a secret. Kids, here's what we're going to do. We're going to play this phrase, and here's the objective. When you share that with the kids, they actually understand it, and then they they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and have a better shot of performing at a higher level. So it's the same thing with the ensemble series. We share the goals of the exercise, then they have a sense of accomplishment with it, and then apply it to real music. And what I like about it also is that we have three major levels of it. We have an intermediate level, the advanced level, and then a young band version. And the nice thing about the young band version is that was an outgrowth of teachers asking for it. Every time we present on the concepts of the books, elementary teachers would come up and say, do you have this for young band, for beginners? And so many people asked for it that we were able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So what resources exist for teachers who might be using the Sound Innovations beyond just the materials that come with the teacher's edition?
Well, the teacher's edition really is super comprehensive. The intermediate level has 412 exercises and chorales. So there's a ton of material within there. Other resources are going to be forthcoming because we're going to be having some online accompaniment with it where we can add more exercises and technique things. That's in development, believe it or not. So that's an exclusive.
All right, cool. All right, Chris. So let's get back to sort of the beginning of the interview here. And let me ask you, what's your background? How did you get started in music?
I got started in music in school band, like many other people. In fourth grade, we had a round. The local music company came in and they did a presentation of all the different instruments. And I immediately, like a very mature fourth grader, ran up, picked up a trombone and went like everybody else would do. And that was my instrument. So I chose trombone in fourth grade and didn't really know what I was doing. That was pretty much the only skill that I could do for a few years until I picked up a trumpet when I shouldn't have before a concert and started making some sounds on a trumpet. And my teacher at the time said, wow, put that trumpet down. You're supposed to be playing trombone. And secondly, you sound good on trumpet. Do you want to learn trumpet? And then I switched to trumpet. So that's how my getting in band started. I
started on the trumpet because my friend started on the trumpet. And I wanted to play the same instrument, but I feel like I'm a repressed trombone player.
I just wound up falling into it. And then kind of a similar thing happened in high school because I actually left band for a little while in high school. And my friends, my social circle, were all band kids. My best friend was in band and the kids that I hung out with. So I went back to band. At that time, I was exploring guitar. I was in a punk band and I was taking guitar lessons. And I joined band again playing bass guitar. And then my band director heard me playing somebody else's trumpet and I was playing a bunch of high notes. I luckily was able to naturally play some of the higher register, high C's and above. So he heard me play. He's like, why are you not playing trumpet? I was like, okay, I'll play trumpet. So then I went back to playing trumpet and then that was it. I decided at that point, this is my instrument. I love this. And I want to live in the world of band for the rest of my career, life. That was my end of my junior year.
Isn't that funny that it took so did you play all through middle school, then take 2 years off in high school?
Yep, that's exactly right. And then 2 years off in high school.
And then you played your junior and senior years.
Yep. Junior year, I played bass guitar. And then senior year, I played trumpet. And I played a lot because I had to do a lot of catch up.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
For me, it clicked. It wasn't just even the trumpet itself. It was, I liked your podcast is Everything Band. I liked Everything Band. I liked the people I was around. I loved my teacher. He was really got me motivated and taught me the right skills. I loved the music that we were doing. The environment was what I liked, which is what drove me to music ed.
Tell me about that teacher. What did he do to foster this environment and to draw you in like that?
I think what he did was he fed off of my desire to learn. So first of all, he had a great sense of humor. He was very proficient as a pianist. He still is proficient as a pianist, as a trumpet player, well-versed in classical style, jazz style. So I think I admired those things about him. He put up with me as being like a trumpet player. And sometimes we can be unique in our attitudes. And,
yep.
And when he knew that I think he recognized that I had a somewhat natural ability, but I really needed to learn what I was doing. I think what I liked about what I admired with him was he fed off of that and pushed me to get better, and not to just get better randomly. He actually made me learn my scales properly, learn my articulations, and develop my range with the correct form and with the right air support. And so he pushed me without being aggressive to become better at what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was being challenged appropriately.
Mm-hmm. How have you pulled those lessons from him into your own teaching?
I think I've pulled those in by trying to recognize where my kids are in their own development and trying to follow a similar model, pushing them appropriately, not too aggressively, but enough that they see achievement and that they're growing each day, or that they learn something each day. One of the things about my class is my wind ensemble is the 0 period. It's 7:15 in the morning. So one of my own personal goals every single day is that my kids need to leave this room feeling that it was worth it for them to get up and get here early in the morning. So that's my own motivation. If they don't leave my room feeling like they accomplished something, a beautiful moment of music or some kind of a, whatever it was, a skill or a phrase or something that was just something to cheer about, then I haven't done my part for the day. So I think finding those places, those little achievements for students, and it could be that today you're going to play your B flat scale, and it's going to be the first time they're playing it, because we also get beginners at the high school level. If that's their achievement and they can go out of here feeling like they did something well, then I feel like that's a great accomplishment. I think I could trace that back to my own development, where I did feel like I was making improvement, even if it was something small each day.
Yeah, that's great. So after high school, you were a music major?
Music ed major, yep.
And where was that?
That was at William Paterson University in Wayne, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And a couple of my friends also went to school there. So I was also very friend influenced. As you mentioned that friends played trumpet. A lot of my friends went to a school within somewhat driving distance, far enough away from home that you can feel independent, but close enough to home that you can go home if you need to. Mm-hmm. And it was, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask about that experience. What sort of experiences did you have there that stick with you?
I would say that much of the teaching that I gained, or much of the experience that I gained through my teachers in college, have stuck with me 26 years later. Even some of the fundamental things that I would do in score study and learning about the inner workings of music from a theoretical standpoint. I was very fortunate to have some amazing teachers, one of which is actually retiring this year. And it's kind of neat because my son Brian is taking a course with him this semester my son Brian is in his final semester at William Paterson, and he's having a class with my favorite theory professor of all times. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, full circle.
Yep. So I think my collegiate experience was similar to my high school experience in that I had great friendships there, but different in that I was immersed in a department of learning how it works. I didn't really know how music worked. I could push the buttons and I could make sound. I didn't read music well. I didn't really understand why I liked what I liked about music. And then being in college and with those particular professors, it fed my need to know. When I hear a chord, I need to know why I like it. Mm-hmm. What about it do I like? What is it built from? What is that? Why is it making me feel this way? Why is a minor chord sad? What voicing of this minor chord works versus another voicing of a minor chord? So being at the college level allowed me the opportunity to go and talk to people who knew, and to teach me what it was about the music itself, the inner workings, the rhythm, all that kind of stuff. So being immersed in all of that was extremely beneficial and exciting to me.
Yeah. And so I know from talking to you that you're very enthusiastic about band and the band world. What was the band like at William Paterson? And do you have any memories of specific experiences there?
I do. We had not a full band. It was actually a little bit of a skeleton band because we didn't have as many majors as maybe some of the bigger schools. So we had a smaller group, but then we would fill in some of the missing instrumentation as we got closer to concert time. Mm-hmm. What I learned about that is that you have to be adaptable, because there are very few things in life that are ideal, especially when it comes to being a band director. There are very few positions that you're going to have complete instrumentation with the perfect balance and the most amazing level of talent throughout the band. You have to learn to adapt to whatever situation you're in and make the best out of it. I think I learned that through that band. And I think I learned that because my professor at the time, it didn't matter if there were 25 kids that were in the ensemble or if there were 50 kids in the ensemble. He was running it to make the highest level of musicianship possible with who was there. And I think that's an achievable goal. So holding a high standard and being able to adapt to any situation. That's one of the things that I learned in that band.
What's your high school program like? Do you have a full band, or is it a similar situation?
We do. We have a really supported and terrific program here. We have, there's 2 full-time directors. So myself and I have a coworker, Meredith, and we have 3 bands. We have a wind ensemble, which I teach. We have symphonic band, which Mrs. Boyan teaches. And then we have a concert band, which is our 9th grade students. And any 9th grade student is part of concert band, no matter what their ability level is. There's a reason for that, because when they come to the high school, it's a very new environment. We have 2 schools that come to us that send his kids here. Plus we have tuition students. It's a new building. It's new teachers. It's new kids. There's a whole lot of change. We keep our 9th grade musicians together to help their transition to high school. And also it gives us an opportunity to get them fundamentally with their music understanding on the same level throughout the year. We use our Sound Innovations books. We use the Ensemble Development Series to help get the kids and fill in any gaps that they might have been missing. Maybe they don't read music as well as each other. Maybe they've been kind of faking some things. We're going to help you not fake it. Maybe they've missed some of their rhythmic reading. We're going to help explain all of that. So our 9th grade stays together and we team teach that. We also have lessons, pull-out lessons for everybody. So everybody in all 3 bands has a lesson with us once a week. And then we have extracurricular. We have our pep band, which we play at our home games in our stands. We have 2 jazz bands, and we have a pit orchestra.
Cool. Chris, so you've mentioned relationships several times so far in the interview, and I know that when we first started talking, you said you had just finished up some work for the University of Maryland's marching band.
Yes.
And do you want to retell that story for the listeners about how the relationship led to that opportunity?
Sure. In my writing career, we could revisit this later if you want, but I did a lot of marching band writing and was very involved with drum corps. Both at DCA is a senior corps level, which is popular here on the East Coast. And then ultimately I wound up writing for a DCI drum corps and judging for DCI and for Bands of America. And through those relationships, you meet lots of people. It's a huge networking thing, but that's not the reason I did it. I did it because my friends were in it and because of the friendships and family atmosphere. You wind up having lifelong friendships with the people that you meet in these scenarios. And my career in drum corps led me to doing a lot of arranging. And I've worked with several percussion arrangers. And one of the percussion arrangers I worked with also works with University of Maryland. And through that relationship, I now do some of the marching band arrangements for University of Maryland. Cool. So that networking piece is really important.
All right, Chris, so we should turn to your career as a composer, or the part of you that's a composer. So you write mostly for Alfred now, or do you write for all different companies?
I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities with Alfred and really terrific people I work with, but I have relationships with several publishers, and they're all independent of each other.
Sure. And so how did you get started as a composer? What did that look like when you were a young band director or in college?
It actually started in college, and it drew from that part of me, like I mentioned earlier, that I just need to know why I like things or why something affects me from a musical standpoint. Which probably stems from my lack of being able to learn to read music. And when I actually learned how to read music, I never wanted to be tricked by something again. But what I wound up doing, I was in trumpet ensemble, and my teacher, Dr. Heyer, female trumpet teacher who was fantastic. She studied with Vacchiano, and I never wanted to disappoint her. And I was in a trumpet ensemble for her, and I just asked if I could write a piece or write some music for the trumpet ensemble. And she said, sure. So I went back and I started working on this. This is back when I had a piano and a Sony Discman, because we didn't have things to pause music really or slow anything down. And I just started working on a piano and wrote some trumpet ensemble music. And we got to perform it. And it was really neat and it was intriguing. And I wound up doing a couple of arrangements for brass quintet. And at that time, I started volunteering with a local marching band to get some experience teaching. And I had asked if I could write a warm-up for the marching band. And he said, sure. And it happens to be that the teacher at that school was a really fantastic arranger, musician, a Juilliard trained trumpet player. And he did a lot of great arranging and transcribing. So I learned so many lessons from him. So I wound up going into the arranging world for a really long time. I wound up growing into writing marching band arrangements for several schools, wound up writing for drum corps, but it wasn't really original music. It was all arranging, which is fun, but different than composition, as you know.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until many years later, probably early 2000s, 2004-ish maybe, that I started to give a try back to composition and original composition. And it was I think around January, and I had a couple of kids that made honors bands, and I didn't have any marching band shows to write at that point. So I said, you know what, I'm going to write a piece. I'm going to give this a try. And I started working on a piece for them. I was also teaching my concert band kids about 5/8 and some of the more asymmetrical meters. And I didn't have any literature for them that was appropriate for their level, their ability level. So I wrote a piece for them, that grade 2.5, 3 level, which is called Pony Express. And then we have our symphonic band, and I wrote a piece for them too, because I didn't want to leave them out. So I had these 3 pieces, and that's kind of what started my getting music out there in my concert band writing career. Pony Express was the first one to get picked up.
Yeah. And so what was that like when you wrote that concert band piece? Now, had you been published with marching band arrangements prior to this?
No, those were all independent, and those were all just individual things. So they were not like widely available or anything.
Are they still unpublished?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So how about Pony Express and those first couple of pieces? What was the process for you to make the decision to say, you know what, these are good. Let me send these and see if someone wants to look at them?
I think it was probably the reaction of my students. Mm-hmm. For Pony Express particularly, it was the whole educational concept of, I'm teaching you a skill, and now let's apply it. And then when I turned to that application phase, I was like, I really don't have anything that they can play that uses 5/8. And I started thinking about that. And really, if you talk about compositional process is different than the function of the music. So I could talk about that later on how each one of those was written.
Right.
But I wound up coming up with a pattern that was somewhat repetitive, but not boring. And they could understand it. And it was neat because I didn't really write I like to go back to the mallet part for that one. The name on the mallet part was Julia, because Julia was playing xylophone. So it was very individualized. I didn't have an oboe player. I don't think I even had a second clarinet section. So I wrote to the instrumentation of the group that I had at the time, which is probably maybe 18 kids in that band. And it sounded good. And the kids really enjoyed it. And they really understood how those asymmetrical meters work. And it was fun. So that was exciting to me. The other 2 bands really liked the pieces that they had. And then I wound up having them. I was like, I don't know, what should I do with these? I mean, it'd be kind of neat. I wasn't really I didn't know what to do with them. So I happened to have, through other associations, other friends that had published music. And I asked them, what should I do? And I got some great advice. And they helped me figure out how to package it and how to go about sending music in for consideration. And I did. I wound up, actually, one of the friends said, don't bother sending anything to any of the big companies because they're never going to look at it. Start with a small company. And well, I'd already had a package to Alfred ready to go because I did some research online and I guess I send it to your editor, whatever. So I already had the envelope ready to go. And I was like, okay, well, when this gets rejected, I'll just kind of work my way down a list and see what happens. So I sent it in, and a couple of months went by, and I was feeling really negative because that's a big part of our composer selves, right? Feeling negative self. I think there's a great chart of it with crippling self-doubt is how we live 90% of our writing life.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, well, I guess I didn't. So every day I would come home, hey, honey, no rejection letter today. And this probably went on for a couple of months. And one day she's like, listen, you just have to stop. If it gets rejected, it gets rejected, but just whatever. Don't worry about it. Literally 5 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was Robert Sheldon telling me that he has this great piece on his desk and would love to have it published with Alfred, and went on to talk to me about it. And it was great because it was the first thing I ever sent in. And second, he wanted it because it did exactly what I was hoping, because it was a teachable goal that really is available for this level. And there's not much out there that does this. So that I loved that aspect of it because it was being published for the educational reason that I wrote it. And then I didn't hear anything he said for the next half hour on the phone because I was just starstruck. So, but that's really what started the whole thing.
Yeah. 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 No, yeah. It's funny because I think about my own experience with that first piece and the first couple of rejections and then the first acceptance. It was such a fearful thing to send it. And now that I kind of am used to sort of sending pieces and having them either accepted or rejected, it just sort of doesn't bother me anymore either way.
No, and it shouldn't. I mean, we have to it's part of the learning process, and it's what we teach kids. We teach kids to take risks. Right? You're going to take a risk. What are kids' failures? I mean, you're going to fail, or your fear is failure. But through your failure, you learn to persevere, and you learn from whatever it was that was failure. If it was a rejection, hey, it's a rejection. What am I going to do? I'm either going to revisit this and say, maybe there's something I can work with this, or you know what? It's certainly not personal. It is what it is.
Sure.
And we learn how to deal with that. So I think about it just the same way that we think about teaching kids. We teach kids to have to become resilient and to deal with stumbling blocks and with road blocks, and we deal with life just like us as big kids. We have to deal with the same things and get better for it.
Absolutely. And you know, I hope that we're all trying to get better every day until we're done.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about earlier when I sent you that review that was in the instrumentals and peer evaluations. We learn so much from each other. You talk about the networking or through social media, or we become friends through the composer. I think Scott Watson calls it something, a composer fraternity. We actually, I find that we're really very supportive of one another and offer each other really valuable opinions and insights about what we do. And I just find that for the same reasons I loved band in high school and I grew through college and through my teaching career, I think the composer side of my career is also filled with people that are kind, thoughtful, generous, giving, and willing to help me be better at what I do, which makes me want to be kind, willing, helpful, and help them be better at what they do. I think it's a natural outgrowth.
Yeah, you answered. You answered a question for me one time, for sure.
Absolutely.
And you know, you mentioned it earlier. It's that idea of crippling self-doubt or the imposter syndrome. You know, I have to fight it back. I talk about it openly that I have to beat back my imposter syndrome every morning. I wake up thinking, God, I don't do this well enough, or gosh, I'm not good at this. And so, you know, it takes me some time. And you know, that composer fraternity is sometimes a good way to help deal with that self-doubt. It
is. Actually, whenever I get together Midwest, or sometimes we're just like standing around, one of the things that always comes up is, so what's your writing process? And it's really kind of fun because there's definitely similarities with what we all do and differences. But some things that we all share is like that terrifying feeling of writing the first note, you know, that panic that you feel. And then somehow you find that groove. And then when you're done, I don't know if you're like this, when I'm done, I kind of completely forget everything I just did. And I'm how did I do that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's like magic.
Yeah. Like, uh-oh. Then I feel like also, and again, I'm not sure if you're similar, like I feel like the tank is empty. I've got nothing left. I'm never going to write anything good again. I have no ideas. It's over. But then you pick yourself up and you start over.
There's a couple things in there. One, I feel like someone described it in the end of writing a piece of music, and this is really inside baseball for my listeners, but at the end of writing a piece of music, there's that magical period where all the pieces seem to go into their place. Do you know what I'm talking about? And all the jigsaw puzzle comes together. And that is just an incredible feeling as a composer. It suddenly becomes clear. And because, you know, there's and during the writing of it, it's not always self-evident what's going to come next. And then when you figure out how it does go, it's like an amazing thing.
And you know what I like too is I like the period after finishing a piece when I force my family to listen to it in the car and they give me their unfiltered feelings about it. Whether it's a title choice or whether it's just like, Daddy, what's that part? I don't like that part. Well, why don't you like that part? Let's talk about that. Or my wife is a great barometer for pacing. You know, that part's just really too long. Or like, how many endings are you going to write to this song? Shouldn't it have ended 20 seconds ago? And not mean, but really these objective, they're outside of it a little bit. You know, they get to see it when it's done. And sometimes we're too close to it to see maybe a part that I should have cut out. or something that I rambled, or something that, you know what, I need to get to the impact point a little bit sooner, or maybe I need to develop this idea. It's not clear. If my kids aren't understanding the flow of this, maybe I need to look at this. Or maybe it's just an imagination thing. Hey guys, I wrote this piece of music. I don't have a title yet. What do you think of? What does this make you imagine? Yeah. And in fact, I think Dancing Kites, my piece Dancing Kites, that title might have come from one of those conversations. And what do you think about when you hear this? So it's really neat to get those afterwards opinions, because then I can revisit things if I need to and maybe shape some things. It's like a sculpture. I can go back and maybe tweak this transition a little bit, or go in and, whatever you want to do with it afterwards. You go back and then it's just playing around with it. The pressure's off at that point. The piece is written. Now I'm just going to play around with it a little bit.
Right. Stephen King talks about his process in his book on writing. And he talks about how he writes his first draft with the door closed and he won't let anyone see it. And then he opens the door and lets his wife read his draft. And then she gives him her opinion. And then he then rewrites it based on that. And that's the door open. I think that's sort of a parallel somewhat.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And she's a musician also. She's a phys ed teacher and a trumpet player. And we met through drum corps and music, which is amazing. So we have a household of music and athletics are a beautiful marriage. They go hand in hand. And I love that, by the way. There are so many parallels in music and athletics in a good way that I think it's really fantastic. But that's a whole nother conversation. But she has a great way of, as a teacher, as a musician, and as somebody who has to explain things, she has a great way of getting me to see things that maybe I didn't see before. Sometimes I don't agree at first and say, no, that's fine. The ending is fine. You're wrong. Yeah, and then I go back and I listen, yeah, you know what? Actually, she's really right. Yeah. And then I write a new ending and she's like, now that's a good ending. And I'm like, you're right. That's a good ending. So, but it is having that barometer. And I'm sure we all have it in some sense, whether it's a wife or a friend, or even I'm going to throw this out to the band and we're going to see how this sounds. Now, kids, send me an email and tell me 3 things that you like and 3 things I need to improve. I'm very transparent with my students too. Mm-hmm. I always tell them, here's something I'm going to improve in my teaching. I have my own personal goals. I'm not going to talk as much, or I'm not going to speak while you are playing, or whatever it is. And so it's very transparency. They know that I'm learning along with them. I
like that advice. I like that as a bit of advice.
Yeah, it's really important.
I talk through my process with my college students because a lot of them are going to be educators. And so I try to talk through, I teach theory and oral skills mostly. And I try to let them know we're doing this because I want you to get better at this. But I've never really actually thought about that as saying to them, here's what I need to do better today as a teacher. I think that's a really interesting tip.
I think it humanizes us and makes less of an intimidation factor. They're more comfortable to come and say, well, hey, listen, even this person's trying to improve themselves. And here's maybe I'll go and I'll talk about something maybe I wouldn't have before. So.
Yeah, sure. And when I teach oral skills, I tell the students flat out that I have so much farther to go. I'm 25 years into my professional career. I've got 25 more years, God willing, to learn that much more ear training, get better. My ears get that much better.
And that's what makes it exciting for us too. I really think that it helps us avoid burnout. Teacher burnout is a big thing. And actually something that rings in my mind that Bob Phillips told me one time, which is, and I always quote this one, I give him proper credit. Do you want to teach the same year 30 times, or do you want to teach for 30 years? And I think that's so true. Every year is different. Every semester is different. Every day is different. I don't want to regurgitate yesterday today. And if I were to approach each school year the same way, I could understand why you would burn out from that. If you have new things to discover, new things to learn, and every year, new goals, a 5-year plan, I like to try to come up with where are we going to be in 5 years? What could be different? Whatever. As long as you're always looking toward good change, not just change for the sake of change, but good change, then you have something to look forward to and be excited about, and avoid getting weighed down and bogged down at least in your teaching. Politically and other outside factors could weigh you down, but not in your teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So, Chris, let's get back to the composition here briefly. And so what's your process look like when you first start? And we don't have to get too inside of it, but what are you thinking when you're starting a piece? Are you starting from a specific ensemble or a grade level? What's sort of in your mind?
All of the above. And I think that's a lot of the intimidation factor of it. If it's a commission piece, I might look at what is the group? Who is the group? I have a commission coming up that I have to start working on. And I'm going to be looking at what is that group made of? What is their ability level? What brought you to bring this commission to me? Why are we writing this piece? Which may or may not influence like a title or a motive or whatever, but at least gives you background on our goal or objective here. And then I can kind of think about the piece. Do you have any specific type of thing for a commission that you're looking for? A lyrical piece, a rhythmic piece, or anything in particular? If that's wide open, then I can kind of just do whatever I want from a stylistic standpoint. If it's something driven, I wrote a piece last year. I specifically said, I want to write something rhythmic and aggressive and fast. Those were my own personal things with it. So that piece I approached very differently than a lyrical piece. I started to experiment. A lot of my writing begins with just improvisational types of things, either on a keyboard and playing from that, or if that's too much for my brain to comprehend at the moment, I'll pick up my trumpet. I find that's good too. I'll pick up my trumpet and just start playing around on my trumpet. The difference being, if I'm playing on a keyboard, I've got multiple notes that I'm working with. If I'm playing on my trumpet, it's a singular note, and it makes me focus only on that I'm working on. So my approach to a new piece depends on a lot of factors. If it's a lyrical piece, I might start working on harmonic progression and kind of see where that lets my imagination lead. Or I might even start working on a melodic line and then see what harmonies influence that. If I'm working on a rhythmic piece, I might come up with like a angular chord and play around with that. But it's usually some kind of an improvisational mode, and try to forget where things should go by theory and see where they go by feel. If that makes sense, because people feel like strangled by theoretical knowledge. I love music theory, and I mentioned earlier, I need to know how things work. When I'm writing, I kind of don't want to know how things work. I want to kind of go with the instinct part of it. And then if I get stuck, then I turn on my theoretical brain and say, well, where should this go? And see if that helps me kind of rein things in.
Right. Going by feel, how do you deal with the problems of form?
For me, I think overall form, I think about, as I'm writing, you're making me think about this what is my process like? As I'm writing, I imagine what it's going to sound like as an ensemble. And I actually go a lot by instinct. I go by instinct on where it's going to be. And if I wind up having like a weird phrase, I go back and I fix it later. And sometimes the weird phrase is actually the right phrase. It should be a 7-bar phrase. If I make it an 8-bar phrase, it doesn't feel right. So maybe this one should be a 7-bar phrase. So I think about form in that sort of way, instinct first, because I find, and this is even true of my own composition learning, the only composition class I took, I mentioned to you offline, was with a brilliant professor, Jeff Kresge, Dr. Jeff Kresge. I'll give him a shout out. Brilliant composer and brilliant theorist. But I had to develop my instinct. He could teach me anything I needed to know about orchestration and brilliance of that. And he could teach me about development of motives and all that stuff. But the thing he couldn't teach me was how to come up with a great melody. And that's something that I think is probably really frustrating in teaching other people composition, because you can't teach inspiration. You have to find inspiration. And some of that comes through experimentation. And actually, I do believe success leads to success. If I start to work out a melody line and I feel like that's achieving this goal and this is exciting and this really works, well, that makes me want to experiment more and build upon that success. So I imagine what it's going to sound like and then tweak it and work with it like it's a sculpture.
So this is great, and I'm thinking about someone who might want to commission you. What kinds of questions should they be asking you, and what kinds of questions are you going to ask them?
Commissions are, first thing that they ask is, am I available? And the answer is yes. I try to work very much along people's timelines, and so far have been able to do so. People are usually worried that you're not going to have time to get it done. I mean, if you call me today and say, can you do something for tomorrow? Obviously not. But I tend to work within people's timelines. And that's the first question that they usually ask, if I'm willing and interested in working with you. If I can, I absolutely will. People ask about budget, and budget, of course, varies depending on the difficulty level and the time involved. And am I coming to visit? Am I going to do a Skype? And how are we going to work out the project? There are so many variables in budgeting. I can't even give you a guideline, to be honest, because it depends so much. I think I want to work with you as much as you want to work with me. Questions I might ask of them, are what I alluded to earlier. What's bringing this commission about? What are you guys doing? Is this like an anniversary celebration? Is this because you want to bring something special to your kids, something that nobody else is going to do? Are you trying to share something with your students, like the compositional aspect of things? Because that could guide us down a different road of maybe talking along the way with the compositional process. Are we celebrating a certain event? Are we commemorating somebody's life, which is a whole nother avenue to go down? I did that with a piece, with that Dancing Kites piece, which is a celebration of life for a toddler who lost his life to congenital heart failure. And in that particular one, I had contact with the mother and shared pictures of him and learned all about his life and learned all the beautiful things. So I would want to know the inspiration for the commission. And then, of course, all the nitty gritty. What grade level are you looking for? What is the time constraint? What kind of rehearsal process do you guys have? When is the concert? When do you want it delivered by? All of those kinds of things. Are there any special things that we're looking for? Solo here, solo there. Let me know the strengths and weaknesses of your particular group so that we can work together to make sure that it's appropriate so that they have a successful performance. Those types of things. I think that's what makes a commission personal. That I'm going to be working with you and only you on this piece of music that's going to be special. And hopefully we'll fill the needs both from a technical standpoint for your students, because as I mentioned earlier, every band is different, that we're going to fill the technical needs of your students and bring to fruition an enjoyable musical experience for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris. So if you said you began your career arranging and then you started to write your band music in 2004, if there's a band director out there who's maybe thinking about writing music or getting into writing for concert band, do you have any sort of general advice you might offer?
Sure. Start writing. Just do it. That's the first thing, is don't say you can't do it or it's some mystical thing that you'll never be able to do. Actually, just start doing it. Write a very simple melody, even if it's just 8 bars in unison for your band. You can call it a study in unison. One of the best ways to get your band to play in tune is to play unison melodies. So practice writing melodies, but actually start doing it, because that's the best way to learn. You can have that exercise and run it, or that little 8-bar melody, and you can hear this worked really well. Or, I shouldn't have the clarinets three ledger lines above the staff and above all the time. You know what I mean? You can learn some things that maybe slip through the cracks that you maybe would otherwise overlook. So sitting down and actually giving it a shot. That's number one. Number two, be open to criticism and be ready for it not to work. And then you can be ready for it to work. So be willing to and ready to change and adapt. And that's even if you get published too. Be willing to change and be willing to adapt, because you can always get better, and other people are going to give you input that might be really helpful. Those are the two things. Just do it and be ready for the excitement or the roller coaster ride. And like you mentioned earlier, don't get put off by rejection. And I don't mean by a publisher. I mean by, this didn't work. This exercise or this little phrase I wrote did not sound like I imagined it would sound. Finale and whatever program you use sounds very different than your actual band. The flute player on Finale is just as strong as the trumpet player on Finale. You know what I mean?
Hero horns.
That's right. So your reality versus perception is going to be very different. So just, in time you can predict those things, but at least when you're starting out, you're going to just have to be ready for it. The other thing I would advise is take a piece of music, even if it's just like a trumpet part, and input it in exactly as you see it into whatever notation software you're going to use, if you're going to use notation software. Get everything right. The title, the composer name, the metronome marking, the articulations, the slurs, and everything, the bar lines, the rehearsal numbers. Just duplicate that page on whatever your notation program of choice is, because you'll learn a lot that way.
Yeah, that's how I learned Finale. When I was an undergraduate, I was given a project to put in some orchestral parts, and that taught me so much about that program very quickly. And
not only do you learn about that program, you learn about what do these instruments do. That's the other thing, is find a band composer that you really like, or an orchestral or string, whatever you want to write for. Find a composer that you really like and study what they did, and just listen. Talk to the players too. Is this easy to do? Is this difficult to do? Find out what the norms are for the orchestration. But that's orchestration. You know what I mean? Orchestration and composition are two different things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would say, to inspire the compositional side of yourself, just start writing. The orchestration side you can learn.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think score study, listening, these are fundamental things. These are basic before you even start writing.
Yep.
I tell all my composition students I listen to a new piece of music every day. Every morning I wake up and listen to something.
That's great. Well, one of the things that I actually do when I'm writing for a particular ensemble, I kind of avoid the music of that ensemble. So if I'm going to write a string piece, I might avoid listening to other string pieces just so that I go with what's in my head and not gravitate toward what other people did.
Really?
Kind of interesting.
That's interesting. I do the exact opposite.
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. You know,
right,
what works for you, it's just different.
Yeah, sure.
When I get in my car, it's funny. I forget what the conversation was the other day. When I get in my car, I'm not listening to music. When I drive home, I'm probably listening to NPR or something. People talking, because sometimes it's like I have to cleanse my palate for a little while. You know what I mean? And just get something different so that I can get back to it with fresh ears.
Yeah, my commute is music free as well. I don't. Yeah. Okay. It is interesting. So I wanted to ask you, what problems or what directions do you think the music education world's heading in the 21st century? What do we have to overcome as we move forward?
I think the biggest challenge we face moving forward is scheduling. And I don't mean guidance counselor scheduling. I mean life scheduling. People, students in particular, being pulled in many different directions. And I find it challenging for kids to be super dedicated to any one thing. So it's a double-edged sword, because I think it's great that kids are being involved in many different activities and clubs and extracurricular things and all of that, and sports. But at the same time, it's very difficult to get them to want to push themselves to be a high achiever at any one of those things. So challenges going forward for the band or orchestra director is trying to adapt your teaching so that everybody can get a little bit better and can feel that growth and to feel a high level of performance. Even realizing that 90% of my students are not going to go home and practice an hour today or even 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of adapting your mindset to, not that you're okay with kids not practicing, but facing reality. This is what they're able to give, and I'm going to make this meaningful for them. So facing that challenge of making meaningful education within the scheduling time constraints that kids have.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I have to be honest with you. I think that advice that I would give them is the same advice that I gave my son Brian starting his final semester at college, which is appreciate what you're doing right now, because you're never going to be in this situation again. He's a sound engineering major. So right now he's working with the best sound equipment that he's going to encounter until he is able to professionally have it. The most amazing mixing boards you're going to have, the most amazing this and that. So don't forget to take pause and appreciate what you have and what you're being surrounded by, because it's something really special. So my 20-year-old self, I would have probably recognized those teachers more than I did. Some of them I actually get an opportunity to thank, like Dr. Kresge. He knows that I value what he did. But I think at that time I would have paid tribute to what I was learning to those particular teachers, because I think they should have felt like superheroes, and because they were and are. And I think I would have actually gone out of my way 20 years ago. I guess 28 years ago, and said to them, thank you for what you're doing. So maybe stop, and maybe I would tell my 20-year-old self to say thank you more to those people that deserved it.
That's never bad advice.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite work for Wind Ensemble?
You mentioned that you might ask this one, and I know the answers that everybody gives, and I wouldn't give one of the standard answers. Yes, I love Legachar Posey. Yes, I love Holst Suite. My coworker and Meredith and I played the second suite on Smart Music the other night for back to school night. I love it. I love it. I love it. But I honestly find great things in every piece that I'm teaching. Mm-hmm. So I have new favorites all the time. Mm-hmm. Like my current favorite right now would be Shadows of the Equinox by Robert Sheldon, because I'm teaching that with my wind ensemble right now, because I wanted to get them, I'm working on their tone. It's a new group of kids working on their tone, their focus, their harmonic balance. I wanted to engage them with a piece that was driven from the heart and can evoke an emotional response. Right now, that's my favorite. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, it might be something else. So I find new favorites all the time, which keeps me excited about what's to come.
Yeah. So I just had a conversation with Jerry Junkin, and I asked the question the opposite direction, and I'm wondering if your answer would change. And what I asked him is if this was your last time on the podium and this was going to be the last thing you were going to conduct ever, what would that piece be?
Oh, man. Boy, I don't know. I'd have to really think deeply about them because I do want to gravitate toward one of those ones that,
Sure.
Whole suite, because I think about the first move in a whole suite, the first suite, and that's such an emotional powerhouse there. But I've had so many of those. You know what one I want to experience again? If it were right today, it would be A Childhood Remembered by Rossano Galante.
Oh, nice.
I'm putting my foot down right now. If somebody said, this is the last one you're going to do, it's called A Childhood Remembered, because I can stand there and I can reminisce the students that I had that played that piece. And everyone was able to connect a personal thought and feeling with it. So I would want to recreate that experience with new people.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe that's more about the experience than the piece. But
yeah, I'm sort of shaping this question over the course of interviews, and so
it is a different way to do it. It's hard to answer. It's not an easy one to come up with on the spot.
Yeah. So how about your own work? Do you have one of your pieces that you like more than the others?
That's another loaded question.
It is, but they're your pieces, so you're not going to hurt anyone's feelings.
No, I don't think I have a favorite. I think for many of the same reasons that I just said, every piece that I have a personal connection with for one reason or another, whether it was the first piece that I wrote or whether it was like for a commissioned group that was bringing it to life for the first time and whatever it is, or whether it's a piece that's dedicated to one of my children or my family or whatever it is. I like teaching them all. I like Pony Express because it's a lot of fun for students and it's got a really clear educational goal. So I guess I would pick that one. But I also like some of the advanced pieces too.
All right, Chris. So knowing that this is the middle of September 2017, and this may be online for years, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to promote or share?
I would honestly like to have people look at the Sound Innovations material because word of mouth is so incredibly important. And I have heard so much support from directors out there. And this is not people that I know. I get emails often that love that they're able to effectively address ensemble skills with their bands. And it taps into the teacher in me. I'm a teacher first and everything else second. And I'm so proud and excited to be able to have a resource that I contributed to that effectively helps teachers do what they do best. It doesn't teach your band for you, but it helps you be your best teacher. So I would love to see more people find that beautiful resource and share the word about it. That's what I would love to see happen.
Great. So how can people get in touch with you?
Email is always great. cbernotas@gmail.com. My website is fine. It's chrisbernotas.com. And Facebook. I prefer people friend me on my professional website, Facebook, which is facebook.com/Chris M. Bernotas, M for Michael, Chris M. Bernotas. Would love to people contact me that way. Either way. Anyway.
Excellent. Chris, so I will see you at Midwest?
Yes, you will. I will be there.
You'll be in the Alfred booth.
I will be, yes. I absolutely will be.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It was great talking to you. Thank you for having me.